Anne Gately is the author of Sunburnt, a memoir of sun, surf, and skin cancer, which was published in April. As a stage 4 melanoma survivor who was given a prognosis of 12 to 24 months and has real-life experience of the devastating effects that sun exposure can have, and is passionate about reducing the incidence of skin cancer in Australia. With a career of over 30 years as a senior advertising and marketing leader, Anne draws on her experience of the industry and consumer behaviour to advocate for a change in our bronzed Aussie narrative. Anne has appeared on all major Australian television networks and will appear in the documentary film Conquering Skin Cancer later in 2024. Fortunately, Anne had a complete response to immunotherapy treatment and just 97 days after diagnosis had no active cancer. And thanks a lot for coming on the Hembury Books podcast.
Thank you so much for having me, Jess. Really delighted to be here to talk about my book, which is exciting.
Yeah, I finished your book last night, so the timing was perfect, which I planned, of course.
Yeah.
Could you please tell people about your book?
Yeah, so my book is essentially at the core of it is about my story with stage 4 melanoma. So I talk about that in terms of the clinical journey, you know, the emotions, the side effects that I had to deal with. But it's more than that. It goes into Australia's cultural norms and how they impacted on my childhood. I had, you know, quite a lovely childhood. Grew up in eastern suburbs, beaches of Sydney, and played a lot of sport and lived the beach lifestyle. And I explore the cultural norms that impacted that. And then in terms of, I guess, what you would call my transformation after my aha moment, I did a lot of secondary research into those cultural norms, why they exist, and the fact that they are still current, and offer some solutions to how we could go about changing things.
So in terms of your goals for writing a book, we always have different goals, I think. What were yours? Because it was very much to spread a health message, wasn't it?
Well, it's interesting that you call it a health message, because in my head, I feel like I've written a book about culture. Mm-hmm. And, you know, and obviously the impact of the culture that we have is poor health in a lot of different regards, but certainly in terms of skin cancer. So I had a couple of goals, I guess, and the reasons that I wrote it. As you said, that I came out of the advertising and marketing industry, and I had a big aha moment at work when I went back to work after I was sick, and a creative execution came across my desk that glorified having a tan. And I thought, there's no way in hell I can approve, you know, that creative execution. But I knew also that there was nothing stopping anyone else in the advertising and marketing community from approving it, because there are no guidelines, there are no standards about things like sun protection and sun exposure. So as a result of that, I started going into advertising agencies and telling my story and explaining how they were impacting on our cultural norms and how they had influence. And so I knew that when I told my story, I had impact. And I wanted to write a book, I guess, because I was hoping to be able to extend that impact. Mm. But I guess at the core of it is probably about finding or having credibility, if you like. So my focus is on advocacy now, and one example I had was I was invited into a Saturday morning news program on one of the main TV stations, and the topic of the conversation was about social media and the really dangerous impacts of some of the trends about tanning on social media. So I was invited on, and I was going to be alongside Professor Georgina Long. And I had a chat to the producer, as you do, a couple of days beforehand. And I said, oh, great, this is my topic. I've had, you know, a career in advertising. I've just done a whole lot of this secondary research that shows the impacts of media on tanning. So I can talk, you know, I'm all over this. And I started sprouting, you know, statistics and research and everything. And I went into that interview, and when the journalists or the presenters interviewed me, all they were interested in was my survival story, which, you know, is a great story, I admit. And then they turned to Georgina and they said, so Georgina, what's the impact of social media on, you know, tanning? And I thought, hang on a minute, like, this is my ball game. Why are you referring to, you know, Doctor Who is, you know, obviously amazing, but, you know, she's a doctor, whereas I'm a professional in advertising. So I thought, I've got to do something with all this knowledge that I have, you know, how can I get it out there? So that was one of my motivations as well, was to unearth all the research that I found.
Yeah.
So I guess it's, you know, ultimately trying to change behaviour, but I'm I'm wanting to do it at a macro level, not just at the individual level, you know. So I'm trying to do, I would like to see systemic change.
And by becoming the author, you become an expert. And so,
yeah, I think it gives credibility, you know.
Absolutely. You're an author on the subject of melanoma, and that becomes the bio when you're on TV.
Yes.
Yeah,
exactly.
lived experience and author. So that's a very powerful way. And a book, I think, does that like nothing else can, right? You could give 100 speeches, but the credibility of a book is such, I think.
Exactly, yeah. I find, you know, people want to talk to me now. I'm saying the same thing.
Interesting.
You know,
you're the same person. Yeah. But I'm sure also in the process of writing a book, you would have solidified your knowledge. That would have further extended your knowledge, the process of putting that together and distilling it.
Yeah, and it focused me. Like, I did go in this research piece, it was so easy to, well, I went down a lot of different tangents, you know. I found out lots and lots of information because it's a very complicated topic. There's no doubt about it. And I made sure, or, you know, I made the decision to come back what is core to both my lived experience in terms of my sun exposure, but also my professional experience. So I didn't want to, because, you know, I started kind of going off into psychological models and of, you know, self-esteem and all that kind of thing. And whilst very interesting and they play a part, it doesn't, I think it would not have been as credible for me to start exploring those sorts of things.
Yeah. The book coach in me says your first book is your personal story. The second book becomes the research, and you may want to, have you thought about doing a second book?
No, I haven't. I guess probably, I mean, you've read the book because I put the research into the book, which, you know, I guess is a bit unusual. No, I haven't. I'm still on, you know, driving this first book. You know, it's only
it only came out in April, but the
possibility, it's 1st of May I launched it. So
right. Yeah. The possibility is always there. I often refer to Rosie Batty, who has the lived experience, and she is consulted for policy. She is both the spokesperson, you know, to government and the researcher, and she has a book. And that to me is the gold standard, I think, in making a difference in something terrible that's happened to you.
Yeah. Well, one of the reasons I ended up kind of doing this secondary research was after that experience that I told you about being on like the TV show, I thought maybe I should go and do a PhD, because if I do a PhD, then they'll kind of need to listen to me, you know. And so I thought, but, you know, I looked into it. I went, not sure if I want to do that. So I'd better look at the research that already exists, you know, and it's there. Like, there is so much research. What doesn't happen is it doesn't see the light of day, or it doesn't come into it doesn't come into industry, or certainly not in the industries where they need to understand it to, make a difference. So I thought, well, maybe my role is to unearth this research,
Yes.
and kind of expose that and get people to hopefully to understand that, because I think that's the first step in what I'm trying to achieve, is that people really need to understand what immediately becomes obvious once you read about it or you see it. I don't know about you now after reading my book, whether you kind of notice things that you go, oh yeah, hang on a minute, why is there no shade at this event or anywhere I go, or
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I know, childcare workers, they have their allowance for sunscreen and that kind of thing, but you mentioned the people who don't. And it is quite shocking. And also what was quite shocking was, when you contacted the advertising standards and they said, well, this is different from showing smoking or something that is harmful. And you were saying, well, it is, a little bit is harmful. So it's, we do need to change our thinking. Absolutely.
Yeah.
We do. There's a lot of work to be done. So you must have a purpose-filled life.
Yeah, so I'm just working out, like now after the book, because last year was very much focused on the book. I was in a fortunate position. I wasn't, working in paid employment, so I spent most of last year on the book. So I've got some ideas for advocacy, kind of a platform. So I'm just working on that at the moment to try and, I guess, infiltrate in the industry. So I'm not a fundraiser. I'm not that's not how I want to, impact. I feel like the most value that I could possibly provide in this issue is to influence the influencers. And when I say influencers, I don't mean social media influencers per se. I mean, the media industry, the advertising industry. So that's what my goal is. So now I'm just working on how I can drive that. Yeah.
You said last year was devoted to writing the book. What was the most challenging part of the actual writing of the book? Was it traumatic to relive some of the experiences you described?
Because I'd been, not so much writing the book, because I'd already started going in and kind of presenting my story in advertising agencies. That was initially difficult and very emotional. But then I got used to telling the story, in a way that I was comfortable with, that I knew that still had impact. So it wasn't really traumatic writing my story, certainly about the melanoma journey. It was probably more emotional in parts, reflecting on my childhood and my relationship, with my family, and like my brothers feature a lot in my story.
Yeah.
That was quite emotional, because I mean, we're actually not a very emotionally demonstrative family. Like, we're very close, but writing those parts of my story, just made me realize what wonderful support I have. And so those things were emotional. I wouldn't say traumatic. Look, I'm also pretty tough. So.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You've got to be, to get through what you went through, the blow by blow of what it is like to be treated by cancer and to suffer from cancer it is terrifying.
Yeah. Yeah.
I asked myself more than once, could I withstand this? And I didn't think I could. It's really terrible.
And you don't know, though, until you're in that situation, right?
Yeah.
But one of the reasons I wanted to be, I guess, quite detailed around that in my story is that, people think skin cancer generically is inconsequential. They don't understand that it can be fatal and how it can affect you, melanoma. And given that there is amazing innovation in treatment, you know, which I've benefited from, and I'm still here, it's still not an easy path. So, you know, I don't want people to ever think, oh, it's okay, you know, I'll be right, I'll have the immunotherapy treatment and she'll be okay, because I've been incredibly lucky.
Yeah.
You know,
I mean, to me, you're a medical miracle to have responded the way that you did.
yeah.
97 days. Incredible.
Yes.
And so, because, you know, at the end you say, I don't want my story to be your story. You on the one hand, you don't want to be saying, I survived melanoma and you can too. You want to be saying, don't get sunburnt.
Yes.
This is a cautionary tale.
Yeah, correct. Yeah.
Can you tell us about the journey to publication? Did you approach traditional publishers?
No, I didn't. So as part of my book writing, I joined a coaching group.
Kelly Irving's expert community.
Yes. So I joined her community, and because I had no idea about the industry of publishing. Yeah. So it was good for that purpose, for the community, having, you know, we had regular catch-ups. So I had, given that I wasn't in paid employment, I had, you know, some regular meetups, which was good to have that routine and things like that. But what I felt talking to people, like I actually knew someone who, I knew two people. The reason why I went to that community actually is I had two friends who had both written memoirs and been published. And one went down the self-publishing route, and one... Sarah Martin.
The lovely Sarah Martin, who connected us.
Yes. And then Peter Scott, who was published kind of traditionally.
Yes.
And
here's his book.
That's him running it. Yes. So, and then there were other people in Kelly's community that I spoke to, and I just felt I couldn't see the benefit of traditional publishing. I just didn't understand both. I couldn't see from a financial perspective how it would benefit. And I thought, I'm not sure that they'll be interested in my book, because I think because of the research part, it's not the formula that they normally...
The commercial viability, that is what every decision hinges upon. Yeah.
And the other thing was I had a lot of contacts, I guess, because of my advocacy work that I'd already been doing. I have two major things coming up this year. I'm speaking, keynote speaking at an international conference on UV and skin cancer prevention, which is in Brisbane in September. And then the documentary film, which you spoke about, is coming out. So the two major events where, you know, I think my book can benefit from. And I thought, if I go to a traditional publisher, I'm going to be making less royalty, and they're going to kind of be benefiting off the back of my contacts and that kind of thing anyhow.
For the lifetime of sales of your book, to me, it doesn't make any sense. Yeah. I'm an author, you know.
Yes.
Give that away. Why give away your IP as well?
Yeah. So for all those reasons, and because I wanted it out this year. Yes. And I thought if I went to a publisher, it could delay it. So I didn't even bother speaking to anyone about it. So,
yeah, you knew what you wanted. Because Hembury Books came about because I've written 2 books and I self-published them, and I desperately wanted a traditional publishing deal for my first book because I didn't really know about self-publishing. And in the course of that research, you know, of how to win that game of getting an agent and a deal, I remember somewhere it said, oh, look, publishers get so many cancer memoirs, like it's another cancer memoir. And I thought, how shocking. And if your job is to say, look, it's another cancer memoir, and you're like, I almost died, you know, it's just so cold to be turning away these incredible stories of survival and stuff. So I like, with my business, I'm like, let's publish your book, but you keep the royalties or whatever. But just going back to what you said about financial viability, what is often, I find it interesting that you have said that, because, you know, with a publishing deal, you may have got an advance. It may not have been a big advance, more than $5,000 or something, but you had to invest your own money into publishing your book. So yes, you get royalties, but royalties are not huge. Can you just kind of explain what you meant?
Well, my understanding was, given where I was in the process, like I'd already spent money on joining, Kelly's group, so I'd invested funds there. So by the point in time where I would probably approach someone, the other thing is, just to backtrack, why I probably didn't go to a publisher was, by the time I felt confident to go to a publisher or an agent, I had invested in, going to the community. I'd already had an appraisal done. So I thought by that time, look, I've invested the funds now. Like,
you really ought to keep the royalties. Yeah.
So it's not that I'd be very surprised if I earned back kind of probably what I've invested in the book, but it seemed to me that, I just overall, as I said, all those things, it didn't feel like the right fit for me.
Okay. Yeah. I wanted to ask about the foreword by Georgina Long,
yes,
which is amazing. And I know, she treated you, she saved your life.
Yeah.
What is she's Australian of the Year.
Yes.
What is your advice to authors? Because clients often ask me, I love this person, I admire them kind of from a distance, in terms of when you gave her the manuscript and how you approached her.
So I have a couple of years ago, when I first got well, or got my clear result, I was very keen, actually, while I was sick, to be involved in trying to solve the problem. And I was looking out for ways to do that. And as I think I kind of mentioned earlier, I'm not someone who'll go out and raise money. I always felt that my role in helping solve this issue would come from my professional strengths. So I had started doing the speaking at advertising agencies, and the Melanoma Institute has a speakers bureau. So I put my name down for that, and nothing much happened. And then they had someone else come in to manage it, and I had a few conversations with her. And I also became connected with Melanoma Patients Australia, which is another organisation which, helps melanoma patients through the journey. And they contacted me once they wanted me to, someone was looking for a survivor story, an interview. So I did that. So I just kept getting these little bits of advocacy opportunities. And I'd written a poem, which is in the book, called Sunbaker. And there was a big report that was done a couple of years ago called The State of the Nation, which was the first holistic look at the impact of melanoma or skin cancer on Australia.
Mm-hmm.
And they had held some research groups, and I'd been a part of the research group, so I therefore knew this report was coming out. And I said to someone, I can't remember, I think it was Melanoma Patients Australia, I said, look, I've written this poem, if you're interested in it for the report, I'd be happy to share it. So they ended up using that as a foreword in the report. And then, it's a very long story, I'm sorry.
No.
And then they were launching the report. So the health minister at the time, not the one that we have now, was launching it. It was going to be in Canberra, but of course COVID hit, so it wasn't done in Canberra. But I also said, look, if you want me to recite that poem, I'm happy to do it. So the launch was held at the Melanoma Institute, and I recited the poem. And I just got to know their comms person a lot, and I kept talking about, I said, look, this is my interest. My interest is in changing the culture. And to be honest, at the time, no one was really talking about it. I said, my background's in advertising. I really want to change the ad standards. So we were just having conversations, and they invited me down to meet. So I went down with Richard and Georgina to Canberra to meet with the current health minister, whose name escapes me, to talk about the impacts of the media on, skin cancer. And So we just kind of became aligned on that topic. So when I asked if Georgina would write the foreword, I went to the comms person because Jen and I, you know, had a relationship. We've been working on some things together. She knew what I was trying to do. And she did say to me, look, you know, we've had other people come to us, you know, that have written books or whatever, and we don't always say yes, but, you know, we know you, we understand what you're doing, you know. So that was kind of, you know, how it happened. And of course, obviously, Georgina, you know, we know each other. When I say personally, we know each other, you know, she's my doctor. So, you know, I've been seeing her, you know, every 3 months or whatever for, you know, 6 years. So,
yes,
you know, we do have a relationship. So I guess it was just, it evolved. So, and then I just thought, well, I'm going to ask. And it was before I think
I wondered that.
before they were nominated even New South Wales Australians of the Year. I think I'd already asked. So, you know, it was just amazing, obviously for a number of reasons, that both her and Richard were awarded Australians of the Year. However, it did get quite stressful for me because I'd actually wanted the forward before Christmas, and then I had a bit of a delay in my getting the kind of my design done on the book. So I'd given them a deadline. I can't remember what it was. It was sometime in January, and I thought, oh, this is going to be difficult, you know, because Australian of the Year is coming up, and
Yes.
so I, you know, it all eventually worked out, which was wonderful. But yeah.
Just out of interest, did you give like a proof copy, a paperback copy, or a PDF? And was it the final version?
I'd given to the comms person, so which she passed on to Georgina. It wasn't. It was pretty close to final, but it was just, I just sent a PDF, I think.
Yes. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. It's wonderful to have it. And, you know, it appears, you know, you've got forward by Professor Georgina Long, AO 2024 Australian of the Year. And I mean, you know, marketing very well. That's powerful to have that on the front of your book. Yeah. Can you tell us about the cover? Because the cover is, again, someone who knows marketing. It's very striking. Can you describe it for people who are listening? Sure. Not me.
So,
and it's your niece who.
Yes, yeah. So for those of you who may have heard of, the image, it took inspiration from an iconic photo of Christine Keeler in the 60s. She was having an affair with an English politician, and she was kind of a model. Anyhow, the photo of her is of her, well, the photo is of me now, sitting astride a chair which is facing in the reverse, and I appear to be naked behind the chair. So all you can see is, like, you know, my shoulders, arms, head, of course, and my legs. And how that image came about, it wasn't actually taken for the book. So as a result of my treatment, I now have vitiligo, which is where basically the pigment of my skin has changed, and I have, you know, white patches on my body, and they're most obvious on my arms and legs, or it's most obvious on my arms and legs. And about 2 years, I think it was, because it started to appear about a year after, no, it wasn't that. Anyhow, it was a couple of years after I was given the all clear, and I thought, I'm not really sure what's happening with this vitiligo. Like, no one really tells you about it. I thought I could just end up going completely white and you wouldn't even know that I've had it. So I wanted to document it. And so that was actually what the purpose behind doing the images was. And I guess maybe, I don't know, it was a little bit about acceptance of it, or recognizing maybe, you know, there's beauty in it, you know. So my niece, who is, you know, a photographer and a videographer, and I said, oh, would you mind, you know, taking some photos of me, and this is kind of the idea that I had. So, yeah, we took these photos, and she took some beautiful photos, and this was one of them. And I never, when I saw them, I just thought, like, they were so powerful. I thought, there's got to be a way to use these, you know, and I thought, oh, maybe we can have an exhibition or whatever. So thankfully it's found a place on my, you know, on the cover of my book.
You should do a related event where you could have an exhibition of yourself and other people. That would be an incredible exhibition because it's the visual as well, isn't it?
Yeah, and a lot of people obviously who've been through melanoma have, you know, scars and things like that. So there is probably something that
the photo of your scar in the book is shocking. How big! I had no idea. It looked like a shark bite. The size of the stitches.
Yeah.
So there was never going to be any other cover image. Once you had the idea for the book, you were like, I also have the cover of the book.
Yeah, pretty much. I did brief it into a designer, obviously, and I said, have you got any other thoughts? And I was kind of working with someone else I consulted with. I don't know if you've come across Debbie Lee. She used to be at Ingram Spark. She does.
Oh, yes, but she's no longer with Ingram Spark. No, yes.
Yeah. So I kind of used her as a little bit of a touchstone on a couple of things. And she said, oh, maybe you've got an old photo of when you were a kid to show the kind of before and after or something. So I toyed with some thoughts, but I just thought that this was such a powerful image.
It's amazing.
It's funny though, I did show it to, I have a friend that I swim with who's he's a fiction author, self-published, and I showed him a mock-up that I'd done of the cover. And he said, oh, I don't know, you've got to think about that when it's online. He said, people will just flip by and all they'll see is your legs open. And so I put me off it for a little while, but yeah, I just couldn't come up. I just couldn't.
Ask a guy and they'll give you the honest answer.
I just couldn't think of anything that was stronger, you know. So
it is such an incredible cover. I love the cover. I'm glad that you had the courage to do it, and I think it took courage to write the book as well. Would you agree?
Yeah. Yes, it wasn't in the writing of the book. It was in allowing people to read it.
Yeah,
that, you know, that really is where I needed to be brave. And I found through the process, because Kelly Irving, she encourages you to tell people you're writing a book at the very beginning.
Mm-hmm.
So that was the first hurdle where I had to be really brave and say, so I posted on LinkedIn and on my socials, and I started telling people I'm writing a book, and that was really scary. And then when I not finished the book, but I guess got to a point where I wanted to share it with people, that was the scary bit.
Yeah.
And then I realised I'd committed to writing the book, but in my head I hadn't yet committed to publishing the book. So even going from having written the book to publishing it was another decision and another scary step to say, yeah, okay, I'm going to do this, you know.
It is. And when you don't have that external validation of a publisher buying your book and waiting for you to deliver that manuscript, you're backing yourself.
Correct.
And I actually think that's wonderful, because I love, my clients have a burning fire. It is completely driven by them, and they won't rest until they've shared their story. It's not an ego thing, it can be, and there's nothing wrong with that. But I know how I felt as well, is that no one was asking for my book. I was giving it to them. And it's not until then you give the book to the world and it takes on a life of its own.
Yeah.
You have that wonderful feeling of, because I wanted to ask you, have you had some amazing letters from readers that have really touched you?
I've had a lot of people firstly say I couldn't put it down.
It's a big winner.
Which is great. And, you know, people who've said, oh, I actually don't read very often, but I was, you know, really surprised. So, you know, so that's really great. And a lot of people just, you know, saying how brave I was. Interestingly, I haven't had much contact from kind of the melanoma patient community. And it might be that I know when I was right in the midst of my diagnosis and going through treatment, I actually didn't want to have contact with other people because I kind of didn't want to know what, you know, what was going on.
Yeah.
And so, you know, possibly that, but I've had lots of lovely feedback.
I think that also takes time because your book is just being released, really. For that kind of powerful, okay, you've got melanoma, here's a book. This is the book you should read.
Yes, yeah.
Can you, with your marketing expertise, could you share some insights for authors on how to successfully market a book and the importance of that being a continuous effort?
Yeah, so I don't know whether I'm going to be able to say that I'm expert in this. So I will tell you that publishing is like a totally different industry to anything else I've been, you know, involved in. So, and I've worked in advertising and marketing on clients with very big budgets. So promoting a book is very different when you've got no money to do it.
Mm-hmm.
My community has been wonderful. So the communities that I have, and I think part of that was what was really important was bringing them along in the journey. So as I said, I told people I was writing a book, which was hell scary, as I said. But people, you end up with allies and people that, you know, are really interested in the journey, and, you know, they'll point out a connection, or, you know, so I've found my communities have been really valuable in launching my book. One of the things that I'm focusing on now is actually libraries. So I did I've been connected with Anna Featherstone. So,
Yes.
you know, look, it's my book. So I bought her book, which was great. And then I also had a few questions. So I reached out to her and kind of spent some time with her. And then she has like a library course, which is kind of tells you about how to reach out to libraries. But essentially, you actually have to email every library.
All the library suppliers. Yeah.
Well, I've gone through the library suppliers, but then to the libraries themselves, you've got to go on, find the library, find the email address, and then email them. So I've had a little bit of success with that. I mean, I'm not talking huge success, but because I've basically just gone along the coast and said, you know,
wow,
I grew up in a beachside suburb. This is what my story is about. This would be relevant to your, you know, the readers that you serve, blah, 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 blah. So I've got a number of author talks coming up over the next few months, which are kind of up around the coast, which I'm having some success in. But I think
please ask people to go to their local library and ask to borrow your book, and that's how they'll order it in.
Yes, yeah. So I need to do a bit more of that. The other thing which is really important from a community perspective is, I guess, just pick up on opportunities that may not necessarily be part of your plan. So through LinkedIn, I ended up getting connected with a guy who's head of PDHPE at a private girls' school in Sydney. And just because, you know, I post about, you know, my kind of, not my advocacy work, but I post about things about, you know, sun exposure in advertising and media and whatnot. And so we just somehow connected on LinkedIn. And he was talking and he said, look, I'm working on this new, basically, skin care and sun protection curriculum for our school. Would you be interested in being involved, like coming and speaking or something? And I said, oh, yeah, sure. And I think this might have even been the end of last year or the early this year. And we kind of kept connecting. And I said to him, listen, you wouldn't be interested in reading a beta version of my book, would you? Because I said, I'd be happy for feedback. And if you think it would need any changes to make it more relevant to schools, I'd be happy to do kind of another edition or whatever. So he read a beta version of my book, which was pretty close to final, actually. And he went, love it. I want to use it in the curriculum for this program.
Fantastic.
So it's a pilot that he's doing, and he's got a lot of people on board, and he's very enthusiastic about it. And in the past, he has written curriculum for New South Wales education. So whilst education was always in the back of my mind, I didn't have contacts. I didn't know it as like an industry to get in, because I thought maybe my book would be of interest, but I don't know the curriculum. So, how do I get in there? So I think, it's also taking advantage of things like that where you can make a connection. And I've done a lot of outreach to media. Nothing's happened much. I had one interview on Canberra Drive because they'd interviewed me when Georgina and Richard got their Australian of the Year award. So I just went back to them.
Mm-hmm.
They interviewed me about the book. So I haven't had a lot of pick up by the media at the moment, but I'm going to give that another push as we get into spring, because, I mean, you can be diagnosed with skin cancer any time of the year, but people talk about it spring, summer.
Yeah.
So because my book's out, has got some momentum, I'm going to hit spring, summer again to reach out to media. I'm working on an event, aligning myself with an event where there will be a really nice story. So
yeah,
I will be pushing it. So in terms of marketing, it's been more PR. I've been trying to, I'm not spending any money like at this point on, any advertising or anything like that.
Yeah.
I'm trying to use, I am, I guess, fortunate because I've come out of the industry. I do have contacts, like I've got creative contacts, I've got agency contacts. I've been interviewed a bit, so I've got contacts that I can go back to and just say, hey, remember when you interviewed me on this?
And anytime there's a news hook that you can capitalize on that could be new research, you become the go-to person. Or sadly, if someone passes away or gets a diagnosis, because, you list all the sports people at the end.
Yes. Yeah. So, look, it's still, very obviously a work in progress. I've lent very heavily, really on my community in the first instance.
Yeah.
And I think there's going to be a second bite of the cherry. And you know what? I just feel that it's going to find its place. Something will happen and it will gain momentum, So
I truly believe it is time. If you think about how Google works, like if you were to start a new blog tomorrow, it would not be top of the search. It needs to be repeatedly searched for and for it to build up and make its way. And to me, it's the same with the book, so that, if someone puts in melanoma book, melanoma memoir, your book is number one, the Google result. And that just, snowballs. Because my book on Myanmar, that's also my goal. Like expat in Myanmar, my book is the book, but it came out 3 years ago.
Yeah.
Takes time.
There's one thing that I probably misjudged is, as I say, I've got quite a lot of connections through my advocacy in the industry of sun protection, if that's what you want to call it. And I probably overestimated the support that I might get from that. So when I mean support, I don't mean, like, people have been very supportive of the book and itself and of me, but in terms of from a promotional aspect, you know what I mean? And what I've realised is, well, firstly, a lot of them are in the medical or academic community and they're just not wired like that. They're not, a lot of them aren't wired to kind of do the the social media posts, you know, promoting someone else's book, for instance. But also everybody has their own message that they're trying to get across, that when they get an opportunity, they're, you know, they're backing their own message, you know. So they're not, you know, they're not giving up their airtime for someone else. So I, you know, and I look, that's totally fine. You know, I actually understand that. So I think that was something that I misjudged.
But don't you think, I don't think that benefits them though anyway. I think some generosity could only improve their personal brand. Do you think though this is also partly a cultural thing? Because I see American authors doing newsletter swaps. They really back each other, like they collab. And I sometimes think we don't get it. And I think we lose a lot of opportunities to put out a social media post. Like there might be a newsletter subscriber list of 10,000. What are they doing?
Yeah, well, I mean, like these are, I guess I'm talking about, you know, in industry, you know, in medical industry or whatever. So,
but I don't think we blow our trumpet well enough in Australia as a whole. We do incredible research and stuff like that.
Yes, yeah.
But maybe because you are the bridge between all the research and making it real. And a really big thing I always say to authors, I always go back to this book called Wired for Story by Lisa Cron, and I really hope she'll come on the podcast. And she explains that the way our brain works is we need a story to process information. And that is why, you know, every news story begins with the case study of the person who's been affected by it, whether you're watching it on TV or not. That's how our brains work to retain information. And without it, it's not as memorable. So there's a basis for doing it that way. So the power of your book is such that there are scenes alive in my mind, like from your childhood, of this exposure and the consequences of that.
Yes, yeah.
And you know what you're talking about. So, well, I mean, you know, it is early days.
And it's early days, and you know, part of from support of some people, like for instance, I've got this opportunity to, I guess I've got opportunity in other ways, and it was before I'd written the book. So, you know, I've got this international conference that I'm speaking at. So that came as a result of, you know, someone who supports me, who's an academic, you know, so he's invited me to do this. And in fact, he was one of my beta readers and gave me, you know, amazing feedback. And, you know, I got someone, I think it was probably the Melanoma Institute, suggested me to the documentary filmmaker to be part of, you know, his, you know, film. And so now, you know, I'm connected with him. So I do have those, you know, big, you know, connections. So at the end of the day, my objective is advocacy and, as I say, trying to help change the culture. So it's not all about book sales. And, you know, so I guess I don't measure the success of writing the book in terms of how many I have sold. Look, I'm a really competitive person, and, you know, if I could sell a whole lot of books and if I could maybe make back the money that I invested in it, that would be awesome. But that's not what is driving it.
But it's getting your book into the hands of readers, whether that be leaving them in street libraries or, you know, going to an event and giving, you know, some, or it's spreading the message, because there's only one of you. But
and just mentioning that, actually, events, I have found in-person sales much better for me. So when I've been, that's the other thing that I've been doing. In my local area, I'm on the events committee at a venue here, which is actually Wiley's, which I talk about in my book, Where I Learned to Swim. It's a, you know, a rock pool with a big deck, and anyhow. So when we hold events down there that I've been a part of, I've taken my book down, and, you know, I've sold, you know, sort of, because it's, people are generally down there because they live in the area, they like swimming, so there's relevancy as well. So I would say take opportunities where you can to find events where, you know, your target market is.
And that live connection you get and the signed copy. I would just want to ask about, you've got a hardback.
Yes.
Why? What do you use your hardback for? Do you use that as like a gift?
Well, I initially did it because I just did it on, you know, KDP.
Yes.
So it's just as easy to do a hardback as a paperback. just have to have a cover, you know, a wrap. I did it initially because I wanted to see it in hardback.
Yeah, hardback's beautiful.
And yes, I wanted to give it to people who, you know, like my family and people that I'd written about in the book. And I had it available for my launch. So when I did my launch, I sold tickets for my launch because, you know, I'm self-funded. You know, it was minimal. It was $15, which basically kind of covered, you know, I had to, because I had it at Wiley's, because that's part of my story and it makes sense. And I did pre-sales of the book. So you could buy your ticket to the event and the book, and I had the hardback available for that. So I sold quite a few there. I mean, well, quite a few, but, you know. So I think I only printed, did I print 50 or 100 of the hardback? And I've got, maybe it was 50, and I've got a few left. So, yeah, I'd keep them for, you know, special purposes or whatever.
I'm dying to try it. And I mean, the option is there, you know, why not do it? But you're the first person I've come across who has done it. So I was like, oh, fantastic.
Yeah, I mean, obviously you've got
$50 though on Amazon. They're about $50.
I know that. I don't. Yeah, I mean, I knew that I would sell them, you know, through my website because I sell directly. I don't know why they're on Amazon. I think I've got a brother who lives in the States. He might have bought one.
Why not have it there? It's not
which I sent him. I sent him one anyhow. Probably cost me more to post it than it cost.
I know. Yeah, international one paperback. I've got to send 2 today. $30 a pop.
Yeah, ridiculous.
Crazy. But I want it signed, so I'm going to post it.
Yeah.
Well, thank you, Anne, for coming on. And wow, so many insights for other authors. So thank you so much. Your book is Sunburnt. Buy it direct from the website, which is that?
And gately.com.au.
Fantastic. Thanks a lot for coming on.
Thank you for having me.